Rose agreed to this supper tonight, but I'm glad she's excited about it." Esther lowered her hand and ran a finger around the edge of her glass of tea. "Our other attempts at playing matchmaker have failed miserably. And she's been here a year." She sighed. "I hope this man will work out for Rose. Sometimes I hear her crying in her room. She's 25, and surely longing to find the man of her dreams, someone to marry and start a family with." Esther sipped her tea as Lizzie took a napkin and dabbed at the sweat beads dotting her forehead. Spring had rolled into summer in what seemed like the blink of an eye. July felt hotter this year, but Esther thought that every year. Maybe it was because she'd just turned 74, and old age was fueling her lack of tolerance to the heat. "I have higher hopes that this fellow is going to work out." Lizzie gave a taut nod. "He barely talks, and Rose never stops talking, so they're perfect for each other." They continued to speak in a whisper so as not to alert Rose to their conversation from her room upstairs. Her responsibilities at the Peony Inn were to cook, help with the cleaning, and tend to the guests. Most of their visitors enjoyed listening to Rose carry on about most anything. Granted, there were some who politely excused themselves right after a meal, but the English tourists were usually fascinated to hear Rose answer their questions in lengthy detail. Esther and Lizzie loved the girl, but Esther often had a headache after a conversation with Rose. She'd never known another person who had so much to say. Maybe they hadn't been firm enough when talking to Rose about rambling on, but neither of the sisters wanted to hurt the young woman's feelings by bringing it up again. "We will just hope for the best," Esther said. "At least she has turned into a good cook." When they'd first hired Rose, the girl couldn't cook at all. Lizzie chuckled. "We're pretty good in the kitchen, but we have Jace to thank for some of the fancier meals Rose prepares." Their previous boarder hadn't stayed with them long, just until he was able to get a place of his own. But the young man was an amazing cook and had patiently taught Rose some of his culinary skills while he was there. Jace married a local girl, Evelyn, in November, and Esther and Lizzie were thrilled, even though English folks rarely converted the way Jace had. True love. Esther wanted that for Rose. "At least the new fellow is Amish, and his mother said he has already been baptized," Lizzie said. "And Rose has been baptized. Now they just need to fall in love and get married." "If that happens, we will lose our employee, and Rose is meticulous at cleaning," Esther said, smiling. "But the girl is deserving of a life she longs for, and God will provide us with someone else to help around the inn when the time comes." Esther and Lizzie had opened their family homestead as a bed and breakfast late in life, following the death of both of their husbands. They loved catering to others, and they loved the opportunity to play matchmaker when they could. Tonight was one of those opportunities, and Esther hoped Lizzie was right, that Rose and this young man would hit it off and fall in love. Rose tiptoed up the stairs with an ache in her chest and tears welling in her eyes. She'd come back downstairs to retrieve some hand lotion she left on the coffee table, but she'd stopped halfway down when she heard her name. She didn't hear anything past, "The right man will love her for exactly who she is." Then Esther and Lizzie had started to whisper, and Rose hadn't heard anything else. But she'd already heard enough. And she'd overheard the sisters talking about her more often than they were aware. Esther and Lizzie loved her, though. Their gentle conversations about talking too much had resonated deep within her, and they were right. She often struggled to be quiet. However, whether it was nerves or something else, she was going to force herself to be silent this evening. She suspected the something else was bothering her more than nerves, but when those thoughts surfaced, she forced them away. As the sisters had told her before, Rose needed to be a better listener. She knew Esther and Lizzie had her best interest at heart. However, even though Rose had been hearing how she talked too much her entire life, the comments still stung. If she didn't change, she was never going to find a husband. Maybe Lizzie was right. Perhaps there was a medication to help her not talk so much. But the thought of being drugged, natural or otherwise, didn't sit well with Rose. Wasn't Esther right? Wouldn't the right man love her the way she is? Still, after so many failed attempts to find her perfect match, Rose was going to have to change. No matter how nervous she was this evening, she was going to keep her mouth closed. Doing so would be especially hard since this was a blind date and already had awkwardness built in. But she was going to prove